Welcome to the Sick Markets and Sick People edition of Not My Generation. I'm Professor James Davenport. This is my colleague Emily Stacey, and we are going to be talking about coronavirus. We're going to be talking about oil price crashes and some of the political response to all of this, as well as a little bit, Emily's going to start us off with talking about some updates on campaign election stuff.
Yeah, so this week has been pretty interesting in the Democratic primary, just to give you a little bit of an update. So you did have some larger states vote on Tuesday, such as Michigan and Mississippi, right? Some more diverse states. It was pretty much a dead giveaway, or a clean getaway, I guess, for Joe Biden in terms of the Biden versus Sanders two-man race at this point. Joe Biden did win a majority of the races and delegates that evening. And again, it really highlighted the problem that the Sanders campaign is having reaching out to communities of color or that are outside of their main base. Bernie Sanders did give a pretty rousing speech yesterday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, and he did so from Burlington, his hometown, and so it was very ominous for folks who were very concerned, perhaps, in the movement that Bernie Sanders kind of saw the writing on the wall and was going to bow out gracefully. But of course, anybody who knows Bernie Sanders knows that he is dedicated to the cause. So what he mentioned yesterday and came out and said was, I am devoted to beating Donald Trump, not Joe Biden, but Donald Trump. And so he really laid out the fact that he's winning the generational vote, although turnout, we can argue, is really, really not good for him, right? He may be winning in the polls generationally, but the turnout there is just not coming to fruition for him. But he did mention that he is winning that generational vote, and Joe Biden is going to have to pivot to really get his base. And so he laid out a few different, very pointed questions that he had for Joe Biden at the upcoming debate on Sunday night. So it will be a very interesting debate going into next Tuesday, Spring Break Tuesday, right? So kids don't sleep. Next Tuesday night, you've got three pretty major states voting. And as I've told my American government kids, Bernie Sanders may not drop out, but the race may be effectively over after next week. You've got Florida and Ohio and Illinois all voting next Tuesday on March 17th. And so it just might be the nail in the Sanders coffin.
Lots of delegates up for grabs in those three states. That's right.
So that's where we are.
The question I have is Sanders really winning the younger vote when a majority of them are just not voting at all for either candidate? Is this a disconnect between these older candidates and younger potential voters, right? And when you have more of them just opting out, not to vote at all, can anybody say, I'm winning that vote? Right.
I think that is a very precarious argument that Bernie Sanders is trying to make among, the generations that are voting. Sure, he is winning the youth vote, if you will, the 18 to 30-year-old vote. But that's not saying much when turnout is 13%.
So yeah, right. And so get out and vote.
Yes,
if you want things to
please.
change, get out and vote. All right, let's shift and talk about one of the big stories in all the news, obviously, is the COVID-19, the coronavirus that is moving across the globe and has come to Oklahoma in a sense, right? We have had last night here in Oklahoma City an NBA player who had tested positive for the virus. The NBA subsequently canceled the rest of the season, or at least indefinitely. They didn't say it would be completely canceled, but they said they're shutting down operations for a while, right? And so we have this type of thing going on. And so what I thought I would do is just start off with some basic facts so everybody's on the same page, and encourage a little bit of caution about your media consumption on this particular topic, right? If you're watching the media, try to stay focused on those programs that are giving you factual information. Stay away from the speculation. The speculation can lead us in all sorts of wrong areas. So stay on those things that are giving us factual information. And if you want the best, most up-to-date information, you can go to a couple of websites and find really good information. The CDC, Center for Disease Control's website, World Health Organization's website, National Institutes of Health, all of those are going to give you solid information, absent all of the guessing and speculation and kind of fear-mongering that some of these media outlets can delve into. So do that. But one of the things we know about the virus is that it is highly communicable, right? Yes. And part of that is due to the fact that it has a more lengthy incubation period than, say, the common cold or the common flu, which 2, 3, 4 days and you're symptomatic and you know you have it.
Right.
With this virus, you could have it for up to 2 weeks, not know it, not be symptomatic at all, and be sharing it with other people. So this helps lead to that quicker transmission, if you will, because people just don't know they have it. There are some populations that are higher risk, right? And so the elderly and those with chronic health conditions like heart disease or lung issues, respiratory issues, diabetes, these folks are at a higher risk for developing more serious illness as a result of the virus. And they should probably take a little bit more caution in who they are out and about with, where they're going, what they're doing, just to be on the safe side. For the rest of us, the reality is that most of us are not likely to catch it. Those of us that do will likely not notice the difference between it and the common cold or common flu. And so there's only a small percentage that are going to develop these very serious issues. And of course, we can't diminish the fact that we have seen some deaths from this, even here in the United States now. But they are a small fraction of it, and usually related to these folks in these vulnerable populations. So try to have factual information, right? That will help control the fear instinct that we can sometimes get. And it's easy to get. When you just don't know what's going on,
Absolutely.
It's easy for people to get scared and concerned. We've started to see runs on supplies at stores, right? So water, hand sanitizer, toilet paper. What is going on with that?
I'm not sure.
I don't know, but you don't need to hoard things, right? It's okay, to get maybe an extra case or two, but you don't need to hoard stuff for 2 years. Have a 2-year supply of bottled water and hand sanitizer.
Probably not.
You don't need that, but common sense things. And so what are the things that the CDC and others are recommending that people do to help prevent either getting the disease or spreading it? One, wash your hands, right? By the way, that's something we should all be doing anyway, right? But wash your hands frequently. Avoid touching your face, your eyes, your nose with your hands that have not been washed. If you're sick, this is really important.
Yes.
If you're sick, stay home. Don't come to class. Don't go to work. Just be safe, right? Err on the side of caution. And for a lot of this, we know that can be a real challenge for people who, if they are hourly workers and they don't get paid, if they don't show up to work.
Right.
So employers, it looks like, are going to be having to make some accommodations as well. And this might lead us here in a minute into kind of the political response to some of this also. Another one is, just cover your mouth if you cough or sneeze or something, Don't spread that stuff around. So do some basic stuff. Keep clean, and don't go out if you're sick.
Yes.
There you go. All right.
Right.
Now, what's going on politically? What are we seeing? Trump made an announcement last night, right?
Right. So we had a pretty major press conference last night from a president, primetime television, right? You get those very rarely unscheduled, right, or unscripted in these times of crises. And so Trump did take to the Oval Office to deliver some remarks about COVID-19. And one of the things that he proposed doing and is apparently going to implement is a 30-day travel ban from Europe, which actually excludes the United Kingdom. And so it does seem to be targeting the European Union members directly, which kind of caused a bit of a panic last night. If you consider the fact that the speech went, what was on primetime television here in the United States, you've got to add 7 hours, right? And so you're getting Americans who are in Paris, for example, who are getting the news that they're not maybe going to be able to get back into the country, perhaps.
Not a good situation.
Right? And so this morning, I read a couple of different news stories from international international publications that mentioned that there was a run on flights back to the United States. So that was just kind of one piece of the Trump announcement last night that was a little bit concerning for certainly global politics.
Now, I don't know about you, but I've done some reading because some other countries have tried to institute different types of travel bans and such. That those in today's environment rarely are as effective as we think that they would be, right? That because of how mobile we already are, and especially with this virus that can be already moving around and we don't know, that trying to institute this kind of ban could be counterproductive in some ways.
Right, and so you do have a lot of health officials who reacted to Trump proposing this ban from European travel or on European travel, saying that it was completely ineffective, that we are already worried about containing the disease and the spread of the disease within the United States in the first place, and that banning travel from Europe specifically was probably not going to be very effective, particularly when we're talking about the spread of the disease really originating from Eastern Asia, South Korea, Japan, China, etc. So yes.
Well, it's the public policy response is going to be complicated, to say the least, right? We have not only is it complicated just because of the nature of what we're dealing with, but it's a presidential election year, and so you can't uncouple those two things going forward. Everybody's going to be looking at how does approaching this affect my chances of being elected or re-elected, right?
Right. You've already had both, Bernie Sanders did the first town hall on the coronavirus just last week, and then Joe Biden has one scheduled this afternoon to respond and to what would seem put out what his plan would be or to take precautions against.
And then we have, of course, a lot of private entities that are also taking responses. So we mentioned the NBA suspending their season. The NCAA came out and announced that the men and women's basketball tournaments would be reduced to simply the players and some immediate family members of the players, and that's about it. So not stadiums full of people any longer. And so we're starting to see that. And one of the things I would remind people is that we had something similar to this back in the early 1900s, the Spanish flu epidemic, right? And it too was a pandemic, went worldwide, and caused a lot of deaths. But out of that, we learned a lot of things. And I think one of those is what we see happening both with the NBA, the NCAA, what we see with some colleges and universities today with moving classes online, which is if you don't have these mass gatherings of people, you might be able to diminish the spread of the disease, right? And so we've learned a lot from that. Also, the circumstances aren't entirely the same because there's a lot more going on today as far as more sanitary conditions. We know a lot more about the transmission of diseases than we did back then that can minimize the impact as long as, again, we stay smart and we stay informed.
Right. Absolutely.
Now, in addition to the coronavirus, we have another major event going on, which is the crash in oil prices. And so if you're not familiar with what's going on here, the Organization for Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, group of, as it sounds, of countries that produce massive amounts of oil, have historically tried to restrict production in order to keep prices at a sustainable level for their members. Russia has never been a part of OPEC, but had entered into kind of this agreement with them that they too would kind of try to abide by these restrictions. Well, Russia announced earlier this month that they're no longer going to do that at the end of the month, that they are going to massively ramp up production. Saudi Arabia responded by, well, we'll see your massive production and raise you. And so now we have what is already an oversupplied market of oil going to see even more out there on the markets. And so for American energy companies, this is really problematic because quite frankly, the price for those companies to be able to produce oil is generally higher than we see in those OPEC nations or in Russia. And so the costs that they incur to do that are higher. When their profits go down, the inability. And why is that important? Well, states like Oklahoma can be impacted because we have a significant amount of our state revenues that are tied to oil production.
Very much so.
If we start seeing oil wells shut down, and quite frankly, we've already seen over the last year oil wells being shut down, fewer wells being started, layoffs beginning to occur, all of this can have a real impact on the state budget and in some sense the state economy as well. And the President and Congress are talking about, again, some public policy responses to this. They've talked about perhaps instituting some payroll tax cuts for individuals. That could be Social Security, or it could be the federal withholding, income tax withholding. We're not sure yet what that would be. Subsidies for hourly workers, so the government in some way making up if you miss work, making that up with some type of cash payment. Then this kind of generic, ambiguous relief for affected industries. I don't know what that might be, although they did mention deferring taxes on specifically airline and cruise and hospitality industries as a result of this. And also, they're talking about expanding the paid sick leave for folks as well. So all of that's kind of on the table. Whether or not any of that will prove effective is, a shot in the dark, quite frankly. But the fact is, the public expects the government to do something, and this is the government trying to do something. And whether or not it works as we would like it to work will just remain to be seen.
Right. So jumping back to the beginning of all of this, right, and the oil price crash, right, this is directly related to the coronavirus, correct? So you have, as you pointed out, right, the OPEC Plus agreement, which does include countries like Russia with the 15-member cartel of oil-producing countries. So the idea was, again, as you said, to remain or keep oil prices stable by not allowing there to be just unfettered amounts of oil supply on the market, right? And so when Russia and Saudi Arabia just last week at this meeting in Vienna decided that, or Russia really decided that they were no longer going to abide by keeping oil production at the same level, and of course Saudi Arabia had asked them to reduce their oil production in light of the reduction of travel due to the coronavirus, right? And this is really, again, where all of this, pandemic meets politics, right? You have consumers who are no longer flying. You have the entire airline industry right now who have canceled or moved certain flights from China, from different affected and impacted countries. Italy is under a complete lockdown at this point, right? And so that makes the demand, obviously, for oil and gas go down significantly, and then the supply is just increased, right? As you're creating more barrels of oil per day, that's going to naturally drive the price down, which is dangerous for those oil-producing companies just like Saudi Arabia, right? And so it's very much tied together, the coronavirus.
These two things have an interaction.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as Professor Davenport mentioned, it is definitely having an impact on American consumers as well. You did have Reuters yesterday point out that the consumer price index has increased over the last month, just a tenth of a percentage point, which is not much, but in terms of the consumer price index altogether in the 12 months from February 2019 to February 2020, it rose 2.3%, which is kind of a
pretty
lot.
Significant, right?
And that was followed by a 2.5% jump in January of 2020, right? So we're talking about significant increases to real folks and what they're feeling come out of their wallet. One of the largest increases that Reuters noted was 5 out of 6 major grocery store group indexes last month. So prices for dairy products, for example, surged 1.1%. So you feel that whenever you go to a place like Brahms or when you go to Walmart and buy that gallon of milk, you're recognizing, and even though it's just nickels maybe at this point, we're still feeling it in this flyover country in Middle America, where we certainly count our dimes.
One of the items that I keep track of when I do my shopping is, don't ask me why, but it's the price of a gallon of milk.
Yeah,
and I've noticed that it has steadily went up just a little bit, but you notice that it went up,
incrementally, yeah.
And so So one of the points you want to make here is, while the oil industry is going to be suffering,
Sure.
others will not. Others will
Right.
benefit from this lower cost of transportation, and this increase in the price of food may be offset somewhat
Sure.
by the lower fuel prices, right? So this kind of, again, there's a huge interaction going on here
Right.
that we don't know about. The best thing you can do for all of this is to stay informed,
Yes.
right? Go to sources of information that are going to give you fact-based information. Avoid speculation, and unfortunately, a lot of media outlets delve into speculation more than fact-based.
Money, right?
Right, and
Audiences.
so that gets people's attention.
Absolutely.
Try to avoid that, and just keep yourself informed.
Yeah.
And we'll all still be here next time, right?
Right, I hope so.
And we have a new email address. You want to tell them about our email address?
Yeah, please. If you have comments, questions, suggestions for topics, please email Professor Davenport or myself at notmygeneration@raider.rose.edu. And hopefully, as I'm saying this, somebody in post-production is putting this lovely
I'm
email
sure
address
they
that I'm
are.
Vanna Whiting right now. So please do email us with anything, any comments that you have, any suggestions, and Professor Davenport and I will be happy to discuss your topics.
Absolutely. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.